Ready?
What would you like the show to be? Good evening, everyone. Can everybody hear me?
Can't hear you.
Yeah. Is this on? Is it on now? Okay, technology. All right there. I do believe you're running. If you would please take a stroll up to the front of the room.
I need a buddy, the buddy system.
And before we get started officially, I would like to recognize the staff, Matt and Tina, for the wonderful spread this evening. Thank you. Thank you very much. And for all of their logistical assistance with the celebration on the sidewalk and, all the election tables and all of that for next week's election. I just could not think of anyone I would rather work with than the two we have. Matt and Tina, thank you so much. I would also like to recognize the stalwart members of the election committee who are here tonight, who have just been terrific, working all year to make things really, be easy for candidates, easy for the voters, everything runs smooth, crystal clear, clean as a whistle, all of those good things. So will my election committee please stand up? Please stand up. A round of applause. Jesse, Susan, and Lauren. Sorry, old age isn't there. We have a format for this evening. The first thing we're going to do is pass around a basket which has some 3x5 cards and some pens in it. And if you would like to ask the candidates a question or make a comment that you'd like them to respond to, by all means, fill it out. You don't need to put your name on it. You can if you like. And pass it on up to the front. So, if you would please, Josh, if you would please start that basket around. Well, you can write down your questions too, but let's start with some written down questions.
Marty, say something about Susan.
I'm coming to that in a moment. So we will open up the questions later in the evening, but for now, just if you would write down questions, pass them forward. The election committee also, as community service, invites residents who can't be here tonight or who are on the shy side to send questions to us. And a number of residents have done that. It's a nice way to include people who couldn't be here this evening or who want to ask an anonymous question. So we have some of those too coming into the community. Now, tonight we have 3 candidates, 2 of whom are here. Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, Arthur. Susan Fanning sends her deep regrets. She was called out of town. She has invited everyone to email her with any questions that you may have. And again, very much regrets that she's unable to be here with us tonight. She authorized us, as the election committee, to give you her email. So I'm going to put it on the official record right now. Anyone who has questions or comments that they would like a response from Susan Fanning, our 3rd candidate, may email her at susan.fattig@gmail.com. You're also invited to call her at 301-951-9578. And I would encourage people to do so. Now, the format for the evening. We're going to give each of our present candidates, 2 minutes to do an opening statement on whatever you would like to discuss. We will then go to questions from the audience and questions that came into the election committee from residents. And we'll give you each basically 2 minutes to respond to the question. You don't need to use your full 2 minutes. You may be concise. At the end of the list of questions, we will have some maybe back and forth where people from the group can in fact speak and directly. And then we'll give you 2 minutes for closing statements as to why people should vote for you. Sound fair?
Yeah.
We hope to be wrapped up around 8 or 8:30. Does that sound reasonable?
Oh, yes.
And the only other housekeeping thing I have to say is that the restroom is in the back if you need it. And say hello to the person next to you if you do not know him or her. Introduce yourself right now. Say hello.
Hi.
All right. Let's go to opening statements. And we'll be alternating between you. Arthur, let's start with alphabetical order. We'll start with you.
Okay.
Please give us your
Okay.
opening statement.
About 8 years ago, I guess it was my first candidates forum here, and I didn't know very much at the time. I think I know a little bit more after 8 years on the council. And Steve Small got up and said, "What's your policy about private trees in the village?" And I said, "I have no policy about that. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what the issues are." But today I do. I was chairman of the tree committee. And we came up with policies actually not to regulate private trees. It looked as though the cost would be too high and the benefits too low. But we did initiate a program to encourage the planting of private canopy trees. And the village, under this program, covers the whole cost of, and provides advice by the village arborist to select a tree and will plant it, and resident only has to contribute $100 to that. Well, there's been very low pickup of that program. We've only had a few people wanting to do that. So I am going to suggest right now that we have a majority of the council here that we waive the $100 fee for the next year and see if that encourages more people to sign up for a very worthwhile thing of planting native canopy trees, not little tiny seedlings, but serious trees on their property, with the advice and support of the arborist, who will check out your location, see what trees may be appropriate. And there's a pamphlet here in the village. You can select trees. There are pictures of them. So I want to promote that. Steve Schmall, thank you for that question. 8 years ago, I had no response then. I do today. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Tiffany, your opening statement, please.
I'm Tiffany Cisna. I'm on Bradley Lane, and this is almost my 6th year on the council. And I think what I have grown to enjoy about this position is just getting to know the residents from different parts of the village. You know, I can tell you dogs and kids and Bradley and Raymond and Melville, but actually getting to walk, you know, north of Shepherd Park and meet residents, and also, you know, when someone says sidewalks in the north end, or, you know, coming here to the bus stop to see what it's like here in the mornings. Just being able to talk to my fellow residents and also be able to kind of synthesize what they're saying in meeting, and then see if there's a way that it should be addressed in Martin's Additions. I enjoy that piece of this. I also think that setting up just some general best practices here in the village, whether it's contracts or you know, budget management, getting, you know, one of the things we did was we put out a glossary that went out with the budget, and I had so many residents say, we didn't know what those terms meant, like, this is great. So just that has been my joy and a desire to continue serving in that way.
Thank you. Let's take a question that came into the committee. What one thing would you change about Martin's Additions, and how would you do it? Tiffany, you go first this
Sure.
time.
The village hall or the village government, there's different ways. I think always getting more people involved. That's, you know, desire to have more voices, and figuring out where do we need to meet people's needs, and how do we do that. I think we've started some of it. I think, you know, getting electronic communication that people could depend on up and running, but still having paper communication for people who request it. The Community Engagement Committee, a couple of folks are here that are on that. And having residents kind of drive that. I don't see all of the things needing to be run by the office or by the staff. Because it's easier to approach your neighbor than it is someone who's, hi, I'm here from the government. I'm here to help you. So I think more community involvement, more resident involvement, and just figuring out how to encourage more residents to engage.
Arthur?
You know, most of the things that we confront on the council just come up. They pop up, and we don't take initiatives to do it. There are two things, though, that are I think ought to be considered. I'm not saying that they are going to be done or will be done, but one are sidewalks where they don't exist today. And another there are areas around the village that are the public right-of-way. Now, generally, it's the residents' responsibility, according to the ordinances, to take care of that. But it's not always clear who's responsible for an area. The bottom of Raymond Street, the bottom of Bradley Street, the corner where the Butterfly Garden now is, on Cummings and Brookville are three areas, but there are others around that we may want to take over and beautify. I know with sidewalks, there's a lot of opposition, and there's a lot of favoritism, or people in favor of them. When I look at what happened on Brookville, and took 20, 25 years to put sidewalks in there against adamant opposition. Now that they've been in for 2 or 3 years, I think it would be hard to find a single individual who wants to take them out. And so I think that it's something that should be discussed and consider the views on both sides of the issues.
Thank you. Let's go to another one that came in over the email. The new streetlights are very nice, but don't seem to light up the streets as much. My front yard and sidewalk seem darker. The cone of light does not reach as far now. Would you support adding more streetlights in places where residents request them? That's Arthur, go to you.
Yeah, actually, the streetlights throw out more light, and it's softer, but because of the placement, the shields around it and so on, it doesn't appear exactly as the old ones do. And there are opportunities to fill in gaps, and it's something that we ought to be considering. We had a lighting engineer who we did fill in a few gaps with the new lights going in, but with experience, we always find new areas. Yes, I would support that. Not every single light that somebody wants, but after review and analysis by our engineer who knows a lot more about, who also has a light meter where he can check how bright it is.
Sounds like a useful thing.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I would want to talk to the resident, where are they, and why is there less light, or is there actually less light, or is there an appearance of less light? Are there tree limbs? We found several times
Right.
that there were tree limbs in the way of the lights that had been put up, or there weren't poles where there were supposed to be poles. So collecting information and then making a decision based off of, what we found.
Right.
I should mention that this meeting is being recorded and will be available to residents, the audio, just like council meetings are, on the website. And I thank the staff for doing that. And let us proceed. The next question came in from somebody here this evening. It says, what is your proudest achievement as a council member?
Can I answer for her?
We encourage cooperation amongst our council members, so it's entirely up to you two. What is the other person's proudest achievement?
Tiffany has brought a regularity to office management, to contracts, to processes and so on. She's paid attention to it more than any other council member, and I think it's paid off over the last few years. So if you're, I'll put that
I
in
was
your
going to
behalf.
say, like the project management, just having
Yeah.
what is the process by which we're going to do these things, and having that be a transparent process, whether it's for contracts that are, professional services for the staff and for the council, or streetlights or street repaving, just having an open process where we put out, these are our requirements, or, hey, we don't know exactly what we need, but this is the kind of thing we want done. So just having a regularized, when we're soliciting things or when we need to get information, having a regular process by which we can do that. That's open for everybody to take a look at, We post them on the website, we send them to Maryland Municipal League, that it's open process for everyone to see.
Good. I think what I'm proud of is just to bring a sense of deliberation and thoughtfulness to proceedings. The things that come before us are usually not all that challenging and difficult. We're not dealing with Pakistan or North Korea, and there's usually answers, but sometimes we've chosen to step away from things, to back off, to not do things. And often there is a little bit of complexity, and I think just getting into that, laying out the issues, where do we go from here? That's, I think, what I'm good at and what I've been proud of doing.
Okay. Let's go to something that you brought up a minute ago. What should be done, what more should be done, what should be done to address the through traffic issues and pedestrian safety in the North End?
Well, as I said, sidewalks would be a good place to start. It would provide a safe area, safer than it is walking in the street today, with a curb and a sidewalk and a defined, delineated area. We've looked, and our traffic engineers have looked, we've counted cars, we've looked at speeds, we've looked at ways to traffic calming measures and so on. We've done about what can be done. We've looked at and considered things like one-way traffic and one way at different times. This raises all kinds of problems. with residents and with the adjoining towns and the state roads. So it almost looks like we pushed that about as far as we can go. Every time we think of another one, chicanes, having cars go in and out like this, it takes away parking spaces. So there are negatives. Having one way means residents can't get in; they have to go around the block. We may just be adding to the traffic on the other street, doubling it up. So the traffic engineers, we've gone over and over this for years, and we may be, as far as we can go. So this is why the sidewalks may be a reasonable alternative.
Thank you.
I think we have done a lot of information collection, which is good. Data is helpful for decision making. The one thing that I think I would encourage us to do, and the council's talked about it, is to have kind of a zero tolerance time period where, whether it's our police that we have now, we add hours to them, or we see if there's another way to get Montgomery County to come in for certain days, times, and just issue tickets.
That's good.
Whether it's a resident of Martin's Addition or Rollingwood, and we can give the residents even a heads up. Look, there will be officers on, but I think that putting a little, I guess, a little bit of stick would be helpful.
There are 3 stop signs that
That are,
people do roll
yes,
through.
yes, and we've talked about it in the past, but we haven't actually said this is what we're going to do. And I know that some people would disagree with that, but at the same time, if we've done the counting of the traffic, we've done the speed. We have not actually told the officers, not I don't care that they're a Martin's Additions resident, but we would like for you to enforce the law.
Right.
For everybody.
Unprejudiced.
Right. Good.
Go.
Good point.
Let me follow up with another safety question. And this picks up on an article that was in the newsletter this month about what's being done to make the school crossing here at Taylor and Brookville safer. Big issue, I know, for all the kids and families on the north end. So let's start with you.
So as poor Matt and Tina know, this is kind of one of the projects that I've been following up on, and we got really close, and there was a plan, and there was money, and there was a contractor, and the state was ready to go, and then it stopped. And we found out recently that there's a new project manager or engineer, I'm not sure of the exact title Matt mentioned in the last meeting, and that he's taking a look at it because the contract that was going to be used had run out, and so the contractor was going to require more money to do the project that had already been agreed upon but not started. And so what we asked for was okay, let's be a little bit more proactive. Let's get our state, elected officials involved in this so that it's not just Martin's Additions and, across Brookville Road fighting this fight. It's that we're actually using the representatives that we have to help push this forward because it is a safety issue. And there are pretty simple solutions. They gave us 2 options. We picked an option. This is one of those things where it's like, let's move forward. It's not another wait and see what happens when somebody else comes up with another plan. It's time for us to say, we need this done, and we expect it to be done.
Thank you. Arthur?
I agree with everything that Tiffany said. There's one additional thing I keep thinking about and discussing with people, and that's have a crossing guard. There are crossing guards on Connecticut Avenue and Raymond and Rosemary, and they're very good. And I've talked to them. I asked who pays them, and the county pays them. But we could pay our own people. This is a service that Martin's Addition could provide. The problems are people need training. They have to know how to do this, and I'm not sure what's involved in getting knowledgeable individuals on the job. It's something that we might consider either getting the county to do it or doing it ourselves, but it's something that we might want to take a look at.
Thank you. I'd like to open it up to the floor for a moment on this question, since we have some committed North End parents here in the room today. Is there anything that you would like to ask a follow-up question for either of the candidates on the issue of the school crossing here?
I mean, I'm really glad it's being addressed. I mean, every day I watch my child almost get hit by a car as he crosses. I mean, because, it's just, they don't know, they just don't realize it's their pedestrian crossing from that side. They come down, I mean, every day, this morning I was like, stop! Screaming. And they stop, but, I think, I guess I was wondering this morning, in the interim, does it make sense to think about a crossing guard there? I mean, you know, there's a crossing guard down at Raymond on Brookville, you know, kids.
Mhm.
Has to be addressed through the school though.
Yeah, but I mean, whether it's kids or someone else, I mean, you know, there's a grown-up standing on Connecticut at Raymond, and, you know, I was sort of wondering this morning, I don't know how many children are crossing at that time, because I'm, you know, it's just I'm only there for a short window, so I don't know if it's a worthwhile investment, but it's something that might be a short-term solution at least.
Huh.
The other option that I see only rarely are where you can hit a button and create little flashing lights.
Yeah, flashing lights, a friend of mine was on the traffic committee in the village of Chevy Chase, and he says, flashing lights are dangerous. The pedestrian thinks that it's okay to go, and cars don't know what they mean and go through. What you need to is have the cars stop, and either a stoplight or a guard could do that.
Would you support a stoplight?
This is a state road, or a county, Brookville is a state road. We could suggest it, but the state is going to be decisive on that. And we've had so much problem just getting lines painted.
Yes.
I think we could also, one of the biggest things we saw, especially when we actually got the redesign suggestions, was there are a couple of parking spaces here, and the fact that the stop sign is set on the other side of a parking space, kind of back from the intersection.
Right.
That, you know, okay, maybe if the state's not ready to, if the state's not ready to go, okay, then fine. We would like to lose a parking space, and if that means we have to shift the accessible spaces to the side now, do that now, and we're going to move that stop sign further out. And, you know, if that's the interim solution, if crossing guards aren't, I think there's a lot of research that would go into that. I have
Right.
lots of different things, school, county, state,
Right.
liability, all of the above. But trying to find, okay, state, if you're not ready to move forward, here's an interim solution that we're prepared to do and help you, you know, take on.
Thank you. Any follow-up?
Thank you.
Just on I guess I'm wondering on the other safety issue, which is just that Thornapple, you know, which is part of the walk to school also. Would painting lines, even just to give you know, even if we don't feel like we're ready to put in a full sidewalk, cause there's, you know, arguments about it, I just feel like even having a visual order that lets a car know, oh, I'm supposed to drive in this part and not all the way to the curb, I just feel like could also be a way for us to baby step maybe towards that.
Yeah, I think our traffic engineer would have to look at that, first to see is it legal, can we do that? But where a sidewalk could go would be on the right of way, that's usually grassy area now.
Right.
Whether we could take space away from the actual roadway with a designated walk area, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's feasible, legal, or would be useful. I don't know. It was something to look at. I think it's a question we could certainly raise with our traffic engineer, who knows a lot more about these things than we do.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
That's a good idea.
I'd say the same thing. You know, I'd want to ask, what
Yeah.
has this been done before? Are we putting people maybe at more risk
Right.
by painting on the street and then some way giving a false sense of safety that if you're walking in this, you're safe? That just, I mean, I can imagine my kids like rolling down the street or pretending
Yeah.
like, oh, well, it's a sidewalk. It's not the same, you know.
Right. And it's the same as the flashing light. It gives a sense of safety to the pedestrian, but possibly not to the cars.
But I think it's
And
worth exploring.
Yeah,
If we-
it's worth talking to our knowledgeable people who know these things.
Sorry.
Well, seeing how we're having a bit of a back and forth, I wanted to back up a little bit actually and do the same with the issue about through traffic, because I was wondering if one option had been considered about putting up signs that basically say no through traffic.
You can't do it legally.
Well, I mean, I thought you'd obviously have to.
We've asked about this, we've checked into it. It's not, you cannot say no through traffic, it's not.
Well, no, local traffic only.
That's also not legal. There are municipalities that do it, but they're unenforceable and illegal. we've looked into that, and these specifically has addressed it. It's come up before.
So one of the
Yeah.
things that we've talked a little bit about is the crowdsourcing apps and how that's changing how people are
Right, that's.
driving. And so Maryland Municipal League, I know, is looking into this so that municipalities are kind of saying, we're all facing, not all of them, but a lot of them are facing the same problem, to try and use them. That's one of the things that we've started using more as a resource. Like, okay, what do you guys do if you're connected to a state highway, but you have, another piece of a county next to you, and you're being told you can or cannot, like, how do you get around it? So I think I would look into,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
if someone's
Think-
telling us
yeah.
if you can't do this, then then what can we do?
Right.
So we have signs
Yeah.
that say dead end on streets that aren't dead end.
Dangerous.
Yeah.
Well, because that's my theory
What?
with Summit, is a lot of people that it's part of a cut through from East
Yeah.
West
Yeah.
to the city, and a lot of and they're the ones who really speed,
Mhm.
and so I didn't know if there's a way to kind of.
I
get
like
it off
Tiffany's,
the ways.
start arresting a few people.
Not a right.
And.
Ticketing,
you get-
ticketing.
Ticketing, it gets people's
Sorry.
attention.
One of those cameras.
Yeah, well, that's another thing, speed cameras has been suggested. For us, it doesn't work. But having an officer on the scene doing the same thing as a street camera, you get ticketed a couple of times, it catches your attention.
They've shown that those signs that show you how fast you're going have a
Have
marked
an
effect, even though they don't have a camera attached to them. It's just like a guilt factor, like
Right.
Wisconsin Avenue, when you
Right.
come down from the.
From Mass Avenue when you're coming down from
Yeah, no,
Wisconsin.
they-
There's also a camera there that's a speed camera.
There's one of the issues that came out of the traffic surveys is that most cars are not speeding. No, there's volume is one issue. Can we control the volume? The other is can we control the speed? When you're standing on the side of a narrow street and a car goes by right next to you at 15, 20 miles an hour, he's below the speed limit, but it seems like he's going fast. And so both the police and the traffic engineers have warned us, even if everybody was under the speed limit, you'd still get the impression of people speeding through.
But Jesse, I'd be happy to look into that. The idea of the sign. I mean, I've seen them.
Right.
They don't have to be the huge ones that are on the little trailer. It can be just on a post that shows. I've seen those, and I think that's, if someone's going 1 or 2 miles an hour over the speed limit, or even if it's just gives them a little heads up. Maybe that.
Or flashing lights or something that you were just 10
But
miles over.
I'd ask Joe, and then what could we do actually to enforce if there was.
Yeah.
If we found people, if the officers weren't actually there to ticket them at the time they were speeding, which they, I imagine, would have to be using their own radars. But I think that'd be something I'd be interested in.
Well, this has been a very productive discussion, I think. Thank you to the residents and the candidates. I wanted to move on to a related question that came into the committee. Should the village pay for more police patrols? And would the candidates support putting cameras on streets where residents request them? Many residents had noted that they have put those home security cameras. My husband did one in our driveway. Not to protect my Jeep, but to protect his Volvo. Priorities. Anyway, would the candidates support putting cameras? The one street that was mentioned specifically when this set of questions came in was Taylor Street, where there have been a number of break-ins into cars. And again, let's start with Tiffany this time, and then we'll go to Arthur.
Whole host of privacy issues come into mind when we're talking about us, the village, setting up cameras versus a resident having a camera. So I would have to ask Ron for some help. And then also just.
Ron is our counsel.
Oh, sorry, our
the village
counsel.
legal counsel.
But also I'd want to look at, the studies relating to, how effective are they? I know that, people put up security camera signs. They may or may not have a camera, and that helps. But also, the first part of the question, I don't remember.
The first part of the question was paying for more
Police.
police patrols,
So-
which you partially answered earlier.
I would target an enforcement for the police patrols. I think we have struggled with, and this has been an open discussion in the council for years, how much does the community policing impact the community and actually change crime in a community? I would say I would definitely if we were gonna do it for speed control or something that we said, we need them to focus on this, we know that that's gonna have, an impact, but just adding more hours, I'd wanna, okay, what are we getting for those hours? And I'd also wanna hear from residents, cause there, as Arthur said on that issue, we heard a lot of, support and then a lot of opposition,
To cameras,
not cameras,
Police.
additional police.
additional police
Additional
and
time
giving
of the
tickets.
police.
Or just
Just
police.
time,
Just
Yeah.
time of day that
Just
they're
ha-
there.
having them come in for more time. What is the, what is the impact that they're having? And people wanna see that data before, the council
Mhm.
spends more money on
It's
additional
rather
hours.
expensive to hire police officers for many more hours.
Yeah.
Arthur?
Yeah, that, Tiffany raises an important issue here. On any kind of a cost-benefit analysis, it doesn't pay to have police here, beyond what the county is providing. There's no crime. But it makes people feel comfortable having the odd cop walk up and down. I have to tell you that the police that we have are so overqualified for the job they do here. We have the head of the murder investigation division. They have law degrees. I mean, they are really good. But there's no crime. And so when we first started doing it, we used to have police from the village of Chevy Chase. They then decided to withdraw that service. They thought they needed them on their own in their own municipality. Then we went a few years without it, and then as our budget started, money started coming back again, we went in and hired these off-duty Montgomery County police to spend a few hours a week. At the time, there were a number of residents who says, "Why are you doing this? It doesn't pay." And if you looked at a pure cost-benefit analysis, you have to agree, that's right. On the other hand, residents like it. They feel better knowing that there's a cop wandering around. And so I agree with Tiffany, if we had a targeted use of it in looking at traffic, where we have a very specific goal, then I think it would pay and make sense to do that, but not as general increasing the patrols.
Thank you. Yes?
No, I partially disagree about the crime because there's been quite a few car break-ins. Now, I can't say that's when police are walking around. It's usually at night. And there've been a few home break-ins. I mean, it's probably a lower number than many other places, but it happens.
Have there been reported? We have not had reports of break-ins in Martin's Addition.
It's just the summertime. We're
It's
getting
just
into it,
starting.
yeah.
Well, it's not
Okay.
this past year, but maybe a couple years ago,
Yeah.
right across the street. And my
Mhm.
neighbors, two neighbors, one next door and one down, one car was broken into 3 times. She said she may not have locked it the first time, but she did the
Right.
second. And the same with the neighbors, they always lock their cars. Someone had and up on some of the other streets, it was pretty.
Yeah, car
common.
break-ins is the most common. In fact, in the last 4 or 5 years, it's been the only.
Well, they said
kind
on
of
the Northwest
infraction.
area and Chevy
Mhm.
Chase.
Yeah, right.
Any other questions about crime, police, and related topics? All right, let's move along here then. This next section is a collection of questions that came in from various residents about, in general, what can the village do to protect our local ecology, our wildlife, our environment? And the first one, Arthur, I'm gonna start with you because it's about trees. And there's a series of questions here. I'm gonna combine them and have you answer them together. Can the village prohibit developers from taking down big trees, like Tacoma Park apparently does? The questioner went on, despite our Tree City USA designation, the village currently has no protections in place for trees on private property. Other jurisdictions in Montgomery County have chosen to put measures in place to guard against clear cutting. Given that trees play an important role in stormwater management and soil stabilization, would you as a council member consider reassessing on this issue? Arthur, let's start with you.
Yeah, well, as the chairman of the tree committee, we looked into this with in a good deal of detail and came up with recommendations. It seemed as though, looking at our neighboring jurisdictions that do have restrictions on taking down private trees, the number of trees that are actually saved was tiny. There are exceptions, there are negotiations that can go on. out of the hundreds of, I shouldn't say hundreds, the hundreds of applications, not hundreds of trees where there's development, something like 3 trees have been saved. And this requires administration in the town, the village, wherever it was, an arborist to get involved. It required a specialized tree oversight committee that got into it, and the percentage and numbers of trees saved was minimal. And when you looked at the cost per tree saved, it just didn't look as though it was a viable proposition. It didn't do anything. It didn't save the trees. Everyone could point to 3 trees in the village of the Chevy Chase Village that were saved, and they were gorgeous trees. But they're the ones. They negotiated with the property developer. They moved the house around a little bit from where it was, and everyone could point to, there's our tree. But this program has been going on for years, and it's been hard to identify other trees that have been saved in that way. What we did suggest was that the builders note what kind of trees were taken down, if they did take them down, and then replant other trees of not the same size, but of a large size. This was not accepted by the council. Our arborist said this is a lifetime employment measure for arborists. It was going to take a large amount of administrative effort and a large amount of arborist time to do it. It wasn't going to be for free. We weren't smart enough to come up with any other ways to prevent trees from coming down. This is why we ended up by having a program to incentivize homeowners to put in new trees. Since we weren't clever enough to stop trees from being cut down, at least we could do something for the future by encouraging new trees. Unfortunately, that hasn't gone as nearly as strongly as I had hoped. So this is why I'm hoping that we can eliminate the homeowner's fee at this point and try it for a year and see if we can get more. Sign up for it. It's there. You can do it. You can get arborist help. You don't have to go out and buy it and dig it and.
Everybody's gonna do it. We had no idea. Nobody that's a new resident had any idea. We will blast it from the
Okay.
rooftops.
Get it out. Tina, get it out. Arbor Day.
People don't know.
Okay.
I have to say, it's been in Martin's editions any number of times
Yeah.
that we've promoted it.
We got an email from the village about tree. Yeah,
No,
so you must not be on the.
I am. I didn't see it. I didn't read it.
Okay. Get it out again. Okay.
Yeah, read it.
More is better, more is better, I think, on this. Tiffany, I want to give you a chance to address the tree question.
So I don't remember the data as well as Arthur does. I do remember that the council came to that conclusion. As far as a reassessment, I think I'd be open to seeing if something has changed since the last time we looked at it. I don't think that we would start from scratch, but if I'm hearing residents don't know about, the tree planting program that we did implement the first time this was really delved into, then maybe that's something that, start there.
If we're going to be a tree city,
Start there.
we should be pushing it.
Going on to again, this is a series of environmental questions that came in. What more can the village do about developers who cause environmental damage to neighboring properties? And there are several pieces to this. One was about sort of preventive measures to prevent environmental damage. And then there's another set of questions that came in about after the fact. The builder's done, they're gone, they sold the house, they're out of state. And maybe running for the hills, depending on what they've done. And then the neighbors see the damage 3 months later, 6 months later, is the first heavy rain. So this is both the before and after. What can the village do? What more can the village do about developers who cause environmental damage to neighboring properties? Start with you.
So I think we have to live within our code, and if we're going to change our code, then there needs to be discussions about how we would change it, and those discussions need to be based off of fact and information that we collected. I also think that we can, it's often a sticky situation pitting resident. Technically, I know people say, oh, it's a builder, it's a faceless builder. Well, it could be somebody who's planning to live there versus another resident, and having the village get into that when it's not something that we regulate. So making sure that we're again, living within the code and enforcing our code, also ensuring that the county is being held accountable for doing their job. If we choose not to regulate sediment, water, the county is doing that or supposed to be doing that. And I think that is something that BMA can do to make sure that as our building administrator and municipal operations and the staff are going out, let's make sure that we're actually holding the county accountable for doing their job. And I think that's something that we've seen improvement on, just being able to have the staff and saying to the staff,
Mhm.
if you see something that's not ours, but the county's not doing it, tell the staff here. You know, if it's a professional contractor support, tell the staff here, because we want to make sure that we're using the county for what we're paying them for.
Thank you. Arthur?
Yeah, sediment control, water management has not been, we have chosen not to take on those duties. When I first came on the council, there was a stormwater committee just wrapping up to see whether we ought to be looking more closely at controlling stormwater. They could not find a problem. They canvassed residents, they walked up and down, they looked in backyards. They didn't see a problem. And they came back and said, there's not a problem for us to deal with. Now, things may have changed, but given that 8 years ago, they couldn't identify an issue, the council chose not to do anything about it. Now, as Tiffany said, stormwater management on a property when a house is being built, there are requirements for controlling the amount of water that comes off on the property and sediment control during construction. And our building site manager, what's he called? Administrator does have the skills and the expertise in the background to review that as he's walking around looking at site, and has called attention to violations.
And then the county would take action against the violator?
Yes, yeah, if
That's supposed to be
they're
how it
supposed to.
works.
If it's brought to their attention that there is a violation occurring. Now, there was one other point here. Oh, Tiffany raised a very sensitive issue. Often, these are problems between neighbors. So it's a private issue, not a public issue. So if my neighbor's runoff is coming onto my property, I don't go to the council and say, village, you have to do something about it. It's something I have to deal with legally or friendly way or whatever with my neighbor. And just because there is a problem that arises doesn't mean it's a village problem. And we've seen a couple of these come up where it's not our jurisdiction, it's not the county's jurisdiction, it's an issue between neighbors. And that gets sticky.
I have a follow-up on the water.
Absolutely. Follow-up questions from the audience. Josh, first?
The water issue came up in the variance request that was denied last week, which I commend you for. And the water issue will come up again if there's a house proposed on Taylor Street. The Third Apple Street and the Taylor Street vacant lots as they stand today are at either end of what can be described as a gully.
As a what?
Gully.
Okay.
So the water flows now through those two little places. And you will be asked for variances to build on those properties in the future. When you're doing the application of variance criteria, one of them is the impact on the community. And it wasn't clear to me in the brief time we had to speak last week as to whether you were considering water runoff as a factor in whether to grant variance. And I think it has been in the past, but I came away with the impression that it wasn't considered a factor last week.
So can we answer the question and generalities as our
You have
council
to
has
vote
prepared us
pending, so you're
for
not
something
covered
else.
in those pending
Yes.
areas.
Well, but our council has just advised us that that issue may come up again, so.
Without reference to any particular
That's
developer.
right,
Right.
in
or various
general.
And we're
requests.
talking about 2 lots now, so we're talking about.
Yes, very,
Yes,
yes.
in general.
Martin's Additions wide,
Gully development.
Gully.
Well put, well put.
I'm from Houston, I lived in a marsh, do I? You know, I can't say that last week it was the biggest factor, God, I just went straight
can't
for
do
it.
that. You
Went
can't do
straight,
that.
went straight
Right.
for it.
Restart that.
Yeah,
that
let's try that
answer, if you
again.
would.
I think it's something that I'd have to ask Ron, since we do not specifically regulate water runoff or sediment control, because we've had sediment control issues in several places. Whether or not the enjoyment piece, I agree with, but whether or not if I named it runoff and runoff impact on resident, if that would be coming into a problem. I don't know if that.
Erosion, property
There,
erosion.
there,
Arthur, would you
I
like?
don't know that- I don't know the answer to
Yeah,
that.
Janine, did you have a?
I just said, the county, we probably can make it, you talked about community and taking advantage of it. Rainscapes with Montgomery County, and they're very helpful on helping on residential sites. And they also have done public ways, can't remember, Largo Creek, so creek that's.
Sligo Creek.
Sligo Creek, they've done a lot of stuff there. We don't have to go that advanced, but that would be another way to work on that. And they're always willing to help you do pockets.
And my husband planted a rain garden or something.
Mhm.
There are rain gardens, swales, a variety of things.
They came and advised him and they reimbursed him for almost, maybe all of it.
Oh, really?
Like at least $1,000 worth of
Wow.
landscaping too.
I took mine myself.
Yeah.
They give you, it's a percentage for how much square feet,
Yeah.
so it can be up to, they give maybe 1,200, depending how, like $5 per.
Let me come back here because you had your hand up, and I promised you
Yeah.
I'd come back to you.
I was trying to ask a general question. You
Oh.
were talking about water issues settled neighbor to neighbor.
Mhm.
So what if you're the neighbor and a developer comes and completely changes the topography of the property and then you get water issues? Does that follow to the county? And can Martin's Additions hopefully back up the resident? I realize county's the last word on water from what I understand.
Yeah, it's a tricky issue. Water, from what our legal counsel tells us, has to be contained on the property. But we don't control that. It's not part of our jurisdiction. It's what the county does. We can see what's going on, observe what's happening, that they're changing the topography, and this is going to lead to an issue, and raise it with the county, as this is
And the
something that's come
topography
up
is
before.
also a county issue.
Yeah.
But that is something we have raised with them in the past, since we generally have pre-construction photos, or there's enough knowledge in the village about what something looked like before. Developer or resident who's doing a significant renovation, what that property looked like before and after.
Yeah.
And to me, the biggest thing is making sure that it's not 3 months after a huge change has been made that we're going back to the county. I think that that's something our building administrator and the staff have done a really good job at. They're staying on top of projects as they're unfolding and as they're moving forward, so that we've been going to the county earlier and saying, hey, we're noticing that there's not a sediment fence up. Hey, this is, there was a lot of earth that was moved from this spot to that spot. Are you guys on top of this? And I think that's something that just the staff has been able to be a little bit more on top
And
of
I,
as far as
and
project
I think,
management.
given that this is coming up so frequently now, is something that our staff should be taking special attention to. You've all heard it, right? Good.
This sort of, I'm just, on the same topic, it seems to me your point about making sure that we're holding the county and the state accountable for the things that they've promised us in terms of the, you know, the traffic. You know, I have heard whispers that the people that regulate water at the county level don't seem to like turn a lot of blind eyes to things, and I've heard whispers of that from people that are employed in other kinds of storm water management divisions of the county. And so I wonder at what point do we start saying, talking to other jurisdictions and
Right.
finding out, are you also having problems with this person that seems to greenlight everything that a developer puts in front of them that has a dry well that's any size, and they say that sounds great. I mean, I don't have the knowledge base, but it sounds like we do as a village have very expert people that are, you know, that we pay who could maybe ask
Inquire
some
about it,
questions.
Right.
Because right now I feel very much like we're at the mercy of
Well, that's a
someone.
good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be up for that. Bernie?
Just technically, you do not have the runoff or the absorption you used to have.
Right, no, we
Right.
don't, no.
That's a big difference.
Well, you know, it is interesting, when we were looking at the tree problem, there were new rainwater requirements put in about 3 years ago, which most builders use dry wells to accommodate that. And Josh made a major point of this. The dry wells got in the way of planting trees.
Trade-off.
There was a big trade-off, but they only think of dry wells. As was mentioned, there are other ways to do this with swales and rain gardens and other ways to handle the water. But the builder goes in, they know dry wells, they put in the gravel and so on, but that restricts where trees can go. So, but it was a major attempt to control water. Now, if it's not being regulated, not being enforced, that's something else. I have not heard about that, but it's something we can keep her open.
Let me
Yes,
go to the
Richard.
next
But we have another question back there?
I just want to say that I think the staff, Matt, Tina, and Doug, have especially done a lot of work to keep the county's feet to the fire. And particularly Doug has been very effective at making sure the county comes out and actually sees what's going on. Is it perfect? No. I agree the county is very difficult to motivate to follow their own codes. But I believe that our village staff has really taken that on and has been quite effective. Not always, we don't win, but we've had some good victories.
Right.
Thank you. The next question is related. What do candidates support, both of you, having the village have the authority to require hydro engineering reports before approving new building plans? That's a very specific question.
I mean, I think that would put us in the business of potentially regulating runoff, and I would need to do some research. Because whether or not we would issue a building permit based off of, great, you gave us a plan that shows you're going to send all the, we don't currently regulate that. So I would have to, why are we asking for those plans, and then what are we gonna do with it when we have that information? We have to.
Yeah, I agree. These are the major issues.
All right. This next question is again a general question. What can the village do about developers who are rude to residents and refuse to respond to the residents' pragmatic, everyday concerns?
It's your turn to go first.
It is indeed, Arthur. This one's on you.
We have formally introduced now a meeting between the builder and local neighboring residents. Now, we were careful to note that the residents did not have the option at this meeting of approving or not approving the plan. That was already been submitted, met all the requirements, it was ready to go. But there is a lot of day-to-day details that have to be discussed, of trucks arriving, when parking, and of that sort of thing, that often are just questions. You know, where are your trucks gonna park? How are they gonna line up? If they're rude, I don't know whether we have an opening to deal with that. Legally, we cannot withhold the building approval. Rudeness does not come in as part of our code. So I'm at a loss. If you have any ideas.
So one of the things that I've seen, and we had I don't remember how many months ago, but one of our last pre-construction meetings was the builder came in to explain the plans, but the residents who owned the house were also there. And for them to be there to hear their neighbors' questions, again, this goes back to what I like about being on the council, for the residents who were doing the building, their builder to be there to explain what was going on, but then the other neighbors to ask. They had the conversation, okay, well, I'm concerned about parking, or we have a shared driveway. How is this gonna work? And that pre-construction meeting gave them a formal opportunity to have the conversation between the two residents and with the builder there. And the builder gave out, their card. Now, not every builder is as gracious as that one was, and who knows if they're gonna be as responsive as they committed to being in the meeting. But that also gives us an opportunity, the village office, to say to the builder and the resident owner, whoever is, look, tell us when you're going to have a big delivery, because we can email every resident on that street and say, hey, they're going to have a big delivery today and you're going to have a hard time getting in and out. It should only take 2 hours and it should be between.
And we can put up no parking
10 and 1,
all sorts of things to help out.
But I think, again, if we can, instead of it being like Nebulous Builder LLC, not that that's happened before, but actually like owner next to other owner, resident, whether those conversations seem to be more human, and that's.
Now, if we have a recalcitrant or obnoxious person who is ignoring residents, and it does come up that they often need village support to do things. And if they piss off everybody, they may not get the support that they need, including variances. I probably shouldn't say this because we have to deal with the record. But in the back of our minds may be lurking some issues about do we really want to go out of our way to help this person? And I think that they should recognize that sort of thing.
The sort of unofficial motto here at Martin's Additions is be nice or.
Yeah.
They won't finish that.
Now, the other thing is if trucks are coming in too early and revving their motors and have their radios playing, that does go against the ordinances, and we can have a stop order and have done that. So.
We have, well, you know something will be starting where next door I live, okay. We have very little parking, period, on our street. We have homes with multiple cars.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even today, a neighbor had roofing done and blocked my driveway. We have a common, side by side.
Mm.
And I mean, they have so much stuff, but they could come in and ask, I'm not going out right now, go ahead, But they just blocked it twice. I had to go out. Not a big deal, it's just for a couple of days. But the big trucks and the dumpsters, isn't there a law they have to be off the street?
They don't have to be off the street, they can't be working. There are times when they can work, but they can be on the street.
Can the dumpsters
No, the
be on the-
dumpster.
Dumpster, no, dumpsters,
I mean, there's no.
there are requirements, you have to have a approval, license for the dumpsters.
So
And they have to
they-
be at a specific place.
So there's no real enforcement from here? Or can you?
Yeah, no, the dumpsters we do.
And you can't block driveways.
Yeah.
And
That's
the,
not
no,
legal,
but in the
so.
park, well, that's probably countywide, but the.
You have to
but
get
the,
approval for dumpsters.
In terms of trucks parking and all of that.
So we can
long-term-
ask them to say, but it's a public street. So we can ask them, we have had success with builders. I know somebody that made a deal with La Firme. They had some of their folks park in the back of their lot. We had, dead end use. Taylor's got a lot of cars, and it's a small street. So
Would you both agree that residents who are having problems with a builder or developer should in fact contact the staff and the council.
Oh, well, very
Yes,
much, very,
yes.
very much so, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Not just suffer in silence.
No,
No, there are regulations that have to be followed.
Excellent. Let me go to the last developer question on the list that came in.
Hmm.
And again, I would encourage you to follow your attorney's advice and more, being careful how you answer this. Is there
Actually
any
follow
way
it.
for the Village of Martin's Additions to refuse to issue permits at all to developers who have a history of violating local, county, or state regulations? Arthur, why don't you start with that one? Give Tiffany a moment.
I don't think legally we can do that.
Even if they have a history of violations.
Yeah, you have to violate, then we can get you. We can't do, what's the word?
proactive.
Proactive or preempt, we can't do preemptive denials.
Your Honor, the fact that I've killed 14 people does not mean I'm killing the 15.
Yeah, yeah.
Tiffany, would you care to
Right.
comment?
We have asked this question of our council, and he has said, you know, either they're in compliance with the code on this project or they're not. Which makes it difficult. I'm very sympathetic to past experiences but that is where
I mean, my one course in business law, from what I can remember from about 60 years ago, is that every dog is allowed one free bite. But then you can regulate after that. In this case, every builder is allowed to bite every time, and
Right.
over and over.
That's exactly the question.
But it might be, you know, I don't know if there is something that we could do for past practice. I just don't know that there is something.
No.
Yeah. Would you continue to perhaps explore that question with the village attorney?
I'd be happy to ask him.
Okay. Next question is completely different. Martin's Addition seems to have plenty of revenue and reserve funds these days. What are your thoughts about reducing local taxes, the timetable for doing it, the amount of the reduction?
Me
Please
first.
discuss.
Me first. Me
Please
first.
discuss.
Our budget for next year has been introduced and it is with a decrease in the tax rate. And this is something the council's discussed for years. I think it's been done responsibly. It shows that we're actually really focused on how much we're bringing in, how much we're spending, and ensuring that there is the rainy day fund that our auditors have recommended we have, and that there is still money coming in for large capital projects like street lights and street replacement, which we're not done yet with, but it also ensures that we're not just sitting on more and more money, which for me, you know, not only is it, should we lower the taxes that residents have, even if it's a couple $100, you know, a couple $100 goes quite the way as at Christmas time at our house. You know, it's also showing respect for the town, but also that the state or the county doesn't look at money that's just sitting in the accounts and say, oh, they have extra, maybe we should.
Yeah.
I think that that's something that's important for us to do. And it's consistent with our auditors
Right.
and our council's counsel.
Yeah, the one tax that we do have control over, the property tax, as Tiffany just said, has been reduced almost to zero. It's still on the books. So if we do need to raise it at a future time, it's there. The fact that we do have the revenues coming in, that's more than our expenditures, is one reason I've been willing to talk about spending more money on crossing guards or police handing out traffic tickets or sidewalks. We have the money to do it. So we can do it now that we are in good times. We won't always be in good times.
Right.
And I know that. We always have a recession, we just don't know when. But when we do have the money, we could be spending it on some of the either capital projects or ongoing expenditures.
Can I say, there's one other thing that I've been really proud of as far as budget. You know, a lot of these projects, whether it's WSSC or Pepco coming in, who knows, doing what, you know, they're supposed to cost share with us for repairing right of way, repairing streets, etc. And that's something that we have just really, you know, encouraged the staff to be aware of, so that when WSSC says, oh, we'll come back and really we only disturbed like 1/5 of the right of way, so we're going to give you you know, 1/8 of what we actually owe you. And we say, no, that's not going to work. And holding them accountable for that. I think that's something that is just being aware of what we're spending, how we're supposed to, what services we're supposed to be receiving from these public utilities. I think that's
Right.
Any comments from residents? All right, moving on to the next question. Do you believe that the postal problems are now resolved, or do we need to do anything else about them?
Oh, God, postal problems. Goes beyond county, it goes beyond state, we're now talking the federal level.
I walked you up to it gradually.
Right.
That's right.
But I think that our approach to the postal boss, the local area, was effective. From what I have seen, postal service has improved immensely. I think the complaints have fallen to just about zero. Have we
Yeah.
had any
Residents
problems?
comment on that?
Yeah, I think they really attended to it.
Mhm.
And this happens periodically when they bring on all the new trainees, and they're just not up to the job. I think focusing on that, writing to our local congressman,
Yeah.
who goes in directly to the post office, that really did have an effect. They pay attention.
And I will note that the post office did deliver the election information packets to our residents on time this year, unlike the 2-week delay last
Right.
year, so
Mhm.
I will add that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the same. I have not heard the complaints. You know, even delivery of the mail when it's dark outside was alarming. If it was delivered, I had something that came 8 months late. It was a check from a client.
But it does show that the village office here does have a feed into the federal government to get things done.
I also think just the advanced planning. You guys, the election committee knew, okay, this was the plan. Okay, we had somebody we were going to email and call who said, I'm accountable for this. We know his name, we know his phone number, gave him a head, okay, it's coming, and they were ready for it. I think that's just, it's a better way to operate.
Right.
You know, it's a better way to operate.
Well, I got 2 pieces of mail that belonged to somebody else this week.
This week, okay.
And I delivered them, and which I always do, and I don't ever.
Were they at least on your street?
No.
Man!
Was it the same number but another
It
street?
was the same
No,
number.
but
But a different
okay.
street.
Okay.
One was the same number on a
Okay.
different street, and the other was just.
Totally
reserved.
Okay.
Thanks,
Are-
Molly, for
Are
telling
there
me.
any other questions or comments from the folks who are here tonight? Okay, let me go to the last couple of questions that came in to the committee. And this one's a really nice question.
Mhm.
What would you do to support having the village sponsor an oral history project? I assume you do support that?
Oral history?
Oral history with our older residents. And the question is really, what specifically would the village be willing to do in terms of funding or assistance to interview our older, longtime residents? And do you have any other ideas about other ways to preserve and celebrate the village history? We can start with Tiffany and then we'll go to Arthur.
So I would, to the questioner, I would ask if they had seen our video from our centennial,
They had.
which
Mhm.
did include a couple of residents here. I loved seeing the generations.
They loved it and they wanted more.
More.
Uh-huh.
And I think I'd have to, you know, what does this entail? What do we, you know, and is this a project that the staff would be taking on, or is this something that we could find, you know, is there a resident that wants to spearhead this?
That's- it would be a good-
And use, you know, the village as a resource to help versus the
Mhm.
village take it on as a project.
And there might be some expenses apparently from the questioner, I'm talking to me, for guidance from a historian
Yeah.
about how, you know, to set up oral interviews. Maybe some technical assistance to tape or video or whatever, not just use a cell phone. But would the village be willing to in fact support that financially?
Yeah, I think if there were a group willing to do this, it was something we could easily back. There was a project like that during the centennial celebration. The video was made from that, but it was an active program. And we do have a number of, on the bookshelf here, there used to be, a number of histories of residents talking about the Cummings farm and such. So yeah, I think it's a good idea to keep going.
And I hear
But-
some willingness to consider a financial commitment to make it happen?
Yeah, if it's properly presented and developed, yeah. We're not just gonna give money away to somebody who says, I wanna do a project.
You're not? I'm shocked. Okay, the last couple of questions here. Do you believe the current council and committee structure is effective? What should change? Would you change anything about the way that local governments works?
I think our current council and committee structure is effective. I think we've made some improvements over the past few years. I think separating elections and ethics was an improvement for Martin's Additions operations. I also think that, again, just it's helped us to have maybe more resident involvement that hasn't been official in a way, community engagement, and just their ability to work with staff on event planning or how to communicate. That's been a resident-driven function, and I love that. I don't think, again, not everything needs to come from a council member or a member of the staff, because then you actually get more organic relationship and community building. So.
Arthur?
As I said before, most of the things that come before us just kind of pop up and pop up onto the calendar. And I think we have improved operations in village management. Tiffany has pushed that. But there was one of the things when I first came on the council, I asked a lot of people, what are the things that you would like to see most happen, and what are the things you would want to see least happen, spend less money on? And the same thing came up on both sides, community events. Some people said, why are you wasting your money on community events? And other people said, we ought to be spending more money on community events and stimulating it. And so there's just some people who aren't interested, but others who are, like everyone here who's here tonight. So I think we ought to cater to the people who want the community event. And we may even still have some wine left over at La Ferme. No, it's all gone?
No.
We used the word credit.
Okay,
That's right.
we used it all
The
up.
community engagement committee was very engaged.
No, so I'm in favor of more community events, and let the people who don't want to get involved stay home. And let the rest of us party.
On that note, let me, on behalf of the election committee, thank you all for coming. We're gonna go to your closing statements in a moment. I wanna thank the staff, remind you all to take the sandwiches home with you, and remind everyone who's listening that in fact this has been recorded, and we appreciate the staff assistance on that. Thank you, Tina, for doing a recording that will be available on the website. Are there any further questions from the residents who are here tonight for our candidates? Candidates, your closing
Okay.
statements, please. Let me start with Arthur, and then we'll go to Tiffany.
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
This will be my 5th election here. I've been on the council for 8 years. I think I'm finally beginning to understand how the village operates, and some of the issues that are involved. And even, I can say, that's already come up before. Some of these things recur. So I think I'm beginning to understand it, and understand many of the issues, but there's always new things coming up. And one of the things I enjoy about it is that it gives you the opportunity to get involved in new things, to learn about new things. The street light issue is an interesting one. They came in, the lighting seems to be good, but there may be gaps, there may be holes. Something we will have to consider about doing something about. But at least the street lights are off the table as a major issue. And the sidewalks, I think, are still before us. I know a lot of people vehemently dislike the idea of putting in sidewalks. Others have a very good argument for doing it, and something that we'll have to deal with in a reasonable way and try to reduce the amount of tension and emotion involved in it.
Mhm.
Thank you. Tiffany?
Well, thanks everybody for being here tonight. I came to meetings, we moved into our house and this bag appeared on our porch and I was like, we live in a village?
Yeah, what
is this?
What is this?
And I remember coming to initial meetings and then somebody said, well, why don't you run for council? I think I was pregnant with Tilly at the time. I was, really? Jeez. And I've loved it because, again, I've gotten to know other residents that I wouldn't have had the chance to meet or maybe wouldn't have met in that environment setting. And I enjoy being able to contribute. I think, you know, we've made some progress with code enforcement and just clarity. We've made some progress with, you know, best practices in the village office, and I want to keep that momentum going. I also want to find ways to encourage more and more people to participate. You know, my kids, when we had a block party that we got policy signed off on in the office on Bradley Lane, like, it was fun to take my kids up and down the street with me as we put out flyers and said, hey guys, this is what we do. We're going to see our neighbors, and to bring folks down. Just finding ways to get to folks out and get community going that are responsible and meeting folks where they are. I'm looking forward to doing that, and I hope to be able to do it for another couple of years on the council.
Thank you all
Thank you.
very, very much. That concludes our community forum.
Okay.
Thank you to the staff. Thank you to the election.
And thank everyone for coming.
Yeah.
Great to have you all here.
Good night, and
Good night.
encourage your friends to vote. We'll see you all at the polls next week.